Hello and welcome to episode 1381 of The Sleeper and the Bust. It is Thursday, February 27th. I am your host, Paul Sporer, joined this afternoon not only by Justin Mason, but also new Fangraphs writer Joe Orrico. What is up, gentlemen? How we doing?
Doing well. I mean, Paul, we've done a lot of shows together, and I've been on this show a few times, but never with you. It's always been as a Jason fill-in on Sunday.
A Sunday guest, yes. So it's great to
first time in your bar and talking with you. So it's a lot of fun, man.
Justin, how are you?
I'm doing all right. It's a nice, beautiful day in California. So
Is it still cold? Is your board still accurate back there?
It is not cold right now. I actually should change it. We got our heater back, we got a new heater.
Well, I know that was part of why, but the weather was cold too. Is the temperature actually rising?
The temperature has been much better recently, actually. Good. So,
I'm sure everyone loves our weather talk, but hey, it's part of the show.
Casual weather,
casual weather. If you know, you know. Mm-hmm. Joe's going to be joining us with regularity here on a midweek episode. So, I'm very excited to have you join us today to begin our outfield chatter. Obviously, it's going to be multiple episodes because there's a lot to cover. And then listen, I love what Jeff did with his tiers. But they're a little not podcast conducive, meaning he did some real interesting breakups where he's got like one tier is Soto and Alvarez. One tier is just Schwarber, which I think he justified why he put him there. But I think it's better to go in ADP order for the outfield here. So that's what we're going to focus on. I will still encourage everyone, and I'll put a link to his tiers in there so you can still check those out. But we've been following everyone's tiers at every other position. This is one where we're not going to. And again, it's nothing against Jeff. I just think that getting these bigger chunks as opposed to the 1, 2, 3 people tiers is going to make for a better show here. So we're probably going to get into the top 2 tiers. A lot of great guys, of course, excellent talent going in the first round, and then a lot of good second, third round talent that I'm really interested to get y'all's thoughts on. But we do have to start with a closer because Kyle Finnegan has re-signed with Washington, and it's a bit of an upsetting move if you've been in drafts and you've been trying to speculate on like a Jorge Lopez or maybe even going deeper in the Nats bullpen. And because we talked offline, I know that, Joe, you have, so I will start with you. Your Jose Lopez and Jose Air Ferreira shares are feeling a little bit worse today. Besides that stinging you, how did you feel about the Finnegan news when you first saw it?
I was a little surprised. I think was it a non-tender or a DFA? I think it was a non-tender.
It was a non-tender because if it was DFA, they'd have 10 days to trade him or he'd be gone. So it was a non-tender. And let me see if I can get how much he was supposed to make, because I know he's making 6.
I think it was 11 but I'm not.
Okay, then it makes sense. Yeah, if it was up there, let's see. Matt Schwartz was projecting about 9 mil, up from 5.1. Ends up getting 6, so he only ends up getting about $1 million raise, which, hey, we'll take $1 million raise, you know what? But I'm actually a little bit surprised that he only got $1 million raise because he had a pretty darn good season, and I don't know how much saves are going to play, as a raw count. It's not fantasy when you're talking about real life there, but he did have 38 saves. Skills were still pretty much the same, though. 13% strikeout minus walk. He's not super dominant with a 22% K, 9% walk, 368 ERA, 134 whip. So he is still one of the shakier closers. Joe, you said you were a little surprised that he went back. Now that he is back, though, where does he slot into the mix? Do you trust him as a full closer? Do you think your Lopez and Ferrer shares are burned or just dimmed?
For now, they're probably toast. I think he's going to be the guy to start the season. But I also think that there's a good chance that at some point he gets dealt, or he potentially could even lose the role. Like over the course of the season, we will remember the 38 saves, and I had a couple shares last year. They were great, but in the second half, he kind of fell off a cliff a little bit, more than a little bit. If you look at the ERA splits, it was 2.45 in the first half, 5.79 in the second half. And it also came with a massive change in the skills, like 26% strikeout rate in the first half, 18% strikeout minus walk rate.
That's 2 different players there.
In the second half, it was a 16% strikeout rate with a 6% strikeout minus walk rate. Like he was a completely different pitcher in the first and second half. So he's not at the age where I'd worry so much, but 33, going to be 34 this year. Not to say that Jorge Lopez is a spring chicken waiting to take over, but I don't know that Finnegan is such a sure thing. 38 saves, I would definitely take the under, but he can probably get you maybe 20 if things break right. Wouldn't be somebody I want as a top 2 closer. If he's my third closer in a draft, I'd feel pretty good about it. But if he's a second closer, then that would mean I punted pretty heavily at the position.
Yeah, I think that's exactly right. He's a closer too. If you've punted, you don't want to pay for saves and you want to splash in that pool during all of the fab period. I don't. I've made that clear millions of times over. So if I ever have Finnegan on a team, he's going to be my closer 3. Justin, what do you think about Finnegan? You co-sign what Joe's saying here with regards to his shakiness. And if so, are you maybe specking still on a Lopez or a Ferrer in, say, a draft champions where we're drafting 50 guys?
I don't know if I would even care that much about Lopez, because are we really that sure he's the guy if
Fair.
they went a different direction? Like I remember years ago, and I was talking about this recently on a podcast. I can't remember which, might have been this one. Who knows? Where like I drafted like all the Washington Nationals closers.
Oh yeah, it was. We were talking about it. Coda Glover, and you were getting
Coda
all
Glover
these
and
randos.
Blake Trinan, and I think it was like Sean Kelly or something like that. And then they traded for someone. And like all of a sudden I was left with nothing. So like for me, like if I'm gonna load up on a bullpen, it's gonna be one that I feel like there is a pretty concrete idea of who the next guy up is gonna be. And I don't think that is necessarily the Nationals. I do agree that Finnegan is one of those guys that I think will get the first shot at the job, but it could be a quick pull. I mean, they clearly weren't like overly enthused to pay him more money, and the fact that they brought him back like doesn't necessarily give me that much of an inkling, especially this late, right? That they're necessarily connected to him. So I agree with Joe. Like if he's my third closer, fine. I don't really care that much, but I want a better solution for my second closer.
Yep, that's exactly right with Finnegan. I think that's exactly how to play it. Just pay for saves, folks. Unless you're in my draft, wait, let me get the good closers, and then I don't care what the hell you do. But let me get my aces because I don't want to do the fab game. I hate it. It's so bad. All right, let's get into outfield. It is obviously, it always looks rich, right? Because there's a million, but you need 5 in a lot of leagues. You need at least 3, even in leagues that have a shaved down roster. And then you also have to contend with guys that are multi-positional eligible, such as somebody like Mookie Betts, who we'll get to. And obviously, I think on the guys that we've previously discussed, maybe we'll just get Joe's opinion since Justin and I have definitely discussed Betts to death, and Chisholm and O'Neill Cruz. Those are the 3 that would get to in this episode that would have been previously discussed. And I think all 3 of those guys are better suited at their other positions. So that does undercut the position a bit. Justin, just at first blush, how do you find the position this year for 5 outfield leagues? Do you find it deep, medium, or shallow?
I find it kind of shallow with some pretty extreme drop-offs. I think there are some interesting names kind of in the middle and the back, but if other people find those exact same names interesting, you can be left holding the bag really, really easily. So
right.
I feel like you want to be very cognizant of where those drop-offs are and make sure you push the guys you want up around. I think there are a lot of guys, especially that the entire industry finds really, really enticing. The Brenton Doyles, the Lawrence Butlers, the James Woods. Like if you want those guys, especially as we literally are about to turn the calendar to March, you're going to have to push on them because they're going to go fast. So
absolutely.
I think outfield is always one of those positions where people are like, well, there's a million outfielders. Well, you need to fill a million of them on your roster too. So like they go a lot faster than I think people give it credit for.
And that's the thing. It's always deceptively deep because people think of all the superstars and they say, I can get one of those. But again, people are hammering that position left and right. And again, taking them and throwing them at second base or shortstop with Mookie Betts, throwing them at third base with Jazz Chisholm, throwing him at shortstop with O'Neill Cruz, et cetera, et cetera. Joe, what is your general league load look like? Sorry, I'm flipping through pages here if people are hearing that. Are you an NFBC type guy? Are you across multiple outlets? And I'm asking that because I want to know, if you got like 5 Yahoo leagues, that's 3 outfielder. But if you're mostly NFBC, that's 5 outfielder. What does your league load look like this year?
It's predominantly NFBC. I did a ton of gladiators. I did 3 DCs, 3 50s, and then I got TGFBI. There's the Earth League. I might do an OC. It's a bit of a lift with the Canadian dollars. It's like $500 for us over here. But I might do one OC. But yeah, mostly NFBC, and then there's Tout Wars and then a couple of home leagues on Yahoo. But predominantly it's NFBC Roto.
So you're living in that 5 outfield world as well as are Justin and I. And so again, you got to get those outfielders. You really don't want to be left with the cutoff where, your number one guy is, I'll say a guy on my favorite team, like Riley Green. I love him, but if he's my number one, the rest of my team better be absolutely stacked because I'm a bit nervous there. So let's just start at the tippy top.
I will say real quick, because I had a really interesting discussion with Nick Pollock when we were doing a mock draft on Monday. And it was just a real miscommunication, because I was talking about 5 outfielder leagues and he was talking about 3 outfielder leagues, and we were talking about the depth of the position a little bit during the draft, and it's like there's so many outfielders, you can get them anywhere, and I'm like, no, you can't, they dry up after a while. And we're also talking about it with starting pitching, and I was all like, wait, are you talking about Yahoo where there's only 3? Because I'm talking about every other league, which is there's 5. And he was like, oh, okay. So we cleared that up, and then it was all of a sudden we saw, so if you're in Yahoo, outfield can be pushed out,
no corner or middle either. So again, those extra guys, your Jazzes maybe aren't going to third base. Maybe you are using him at outfield instead. And so that Yahoo to NFBC or to ESPN or to whatever outlet or whatever format you're using, that's very important. And we've had those debates too, Nick and I, with regards to starting pitchers, where he's like, wait. And I'm like, well, 15 teamers, I can't. 12 teamer, he'll say like a mid-tier guy that I really like is like, he's kind of an afterthought. I'm like, well, you're thinking 12s, where those extra 3 teams are a big difference. So you really got to get on the same page of league depth that you are talking about. So again, we are focused mostly on 5 outfielder situations. Obviously, we talk about the players, as they are, and we'll specify when we do talk deep leagues. We will specify if we're saying this is a good draft champions type pick, this is a good shallower league pick because you can replace him more easily, things like that. We try to be really clear with where we're at, and if anybody ever has questions and say, hey, I'm thinking about this guy in a 3 outfield league, what do you think? We're always open to answering that. So let's get started. Let's talk with the big dog. He is the king by himself at the tippy top there. Aaron Judge has an ADP of 3. He hasn't gone 1 in any of these DCs that I'm looking at since February 10th. That covers 18 leagues right now. He's gone as high as 2, but with a max of 5. And so he separates himself. There's a bunch of first-round guys we're going to get into, but he separates himself. Is he a number 2 pick for you, Justin, Aaron Judge?
No,
I don't. 3 pick.
No. Okay,
where are you at with him then?
I am probably not going to end up with Aaron Judge unless he falls in a draft. I understand why he's going as high as he is, but I also feel like there's still some injury risk with him that is a little bit scary to me. So for me, Jose Ramirez is my clear number 3. I got 2 in Barth, so it's obviously Ohtani or Witt right there. Right there for me. I think I start having the Judge discussion when we get to 4-5 with Ellie, Gunnar, Soto, and Judge, and I can make the argument for Soto over Judge just because of the safety angle of it, but I also understand the upside angle.
The safety meaning health.
The safety meaning health.
Okay.
Right? I know that Judge played. Can't even remember how many games last year, but
I got you. $158.
That body just is so big. It's just so big, and I just do worry about kind of previous health concerns, and that just pushes him down a little bit for me. Now, my projections say I should not be concerned. So it's I kind of go back and forth, and I think for me it's just going to depend on the day at the draft table.
It is interesting in the RotoWire Online Championship, which is Fab League, 12-teamer. He has gone as high as 1. There have been 23 such drafts. Again, the timetable I'm using is since February 10th through February 27th here, and there's been 23 drafts. He's gone as high as 1, Judge has, and still that max of 5. So he doesn't really get past pick 5 there. Joe, where do you come out on Judge? Do you share some of those injury concerns that Justin has, or are you willing to take the plunge on the big dog?
So I actually don't think I've drafted him this year, but it's more just the KDS where I end up in the draft. I don't think I've had the number 3 pick this year. He is my number 3.
Okay.
Behind Witt and then Ohtani. I have Witt at 1 right now, Ohtani at 2, which I also think that you can kind of coin flip those ones, but that's for another day. But Judge with the injury concerns, I don't know. I don't see him as big of a risk as Justin does. If I look at the last 4 years, 148, 157, 106, and 158. And that 106 was due to a kind of a fluky injury. that he had at Dodger Stadium where he ran into the wall. So I think that he's been pretty healthy for the last 4 years, and we're still kind of remembering 2018, 2019, where he did have to miss time, 2020. But he has been pretty safe, and I think if we just look at what he did last year, I mean, everybody's going to remember Ohtani's season from last season, but Judge had a 218 WRC plus. Like, it's just absolutely stupid.
Really, it absolutely, that's the right way to put it. Very stupid how good he is at baseball.
2.25 players worth of production, essentially.
Mm-hmm. He's 2.25 player size, so it makes sense, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's funny when Altuve's putting up a player and a half and upwards of 2 players because he's so small. But when Judge does it, you're like, yeah, that makes sense. He is the body type of 2.5 players, just or 2.25. He's just unbelievable. The power production is massive, and you do bring up a good point there, Joe. With when you're looking at 3 of the last 4 years, getting well over the 600 plate appearance mark and hitting that 704 last year. Unbelievable. When you see that 7, it's very rare these days. Only a handful of guys do it. Judge was one of them. So yeah, I see why he goes that high. I have not landed on him myself because he wasn't the one spot where he was available. So it was J-Ram. So I took him. And then the other early picks that I've had, I just missed out on him and quote unquote had to settle for Juan Soto, which I'm totally fine with. And I'm going to use that as our transition into Soto. Former teammates, now foes, now crosstown rivals here. Juan Soto moving over to the Mets. You know, Justin, you talked about his safety and it's just kind of ho-hum. He's a god. He's going to be a god again. What do you think of Soto year 1? You know, we've expressed in deference to the smart system that Glenn Colton and Rick Wolf use. One of their tenets is, you know, be careful about year 1 of a big mega deal. They got to have a little transition there. I subscribe to that, but I do lighten it a little bit here because sometimes you have that concern about New York, right? Well, how will the guys react to New York because it's such a different thing? Soto already spent a year there. So I don't have as much of a concern. Yes, he did get, you know, $750 million. That is a huge deal and all that, but I'm not carrying as much of that concern because he already spent a year in New York. Where do you come out with Soto in year 1 of his mega deal with the Mets? Is he going to go Beltron on us and take a year to adjust or just crush out the gate?
I think he's just going to crush out the gate. I just think that he is the best pure hitter in baseball. And I just think he could hit on the moon or in the Mariana Trench or wherever you want it. Like
he could hit out the Grand Canyon. Yeah.
Like, I just think he could do anything. And I just have zero concerns about him. I got him at pick 8 in Barth and was just totally, totally excited to start off my team with Soto. Obviously, you're going to have to kind of, you know, adjust your stolen base projection, you know, for the rest of your team once you draft him because he's not going to be stealing very many bases. But that being said, like, you can pretty much bank, like, I don't know, like a 280 average, you know, 35 to 40 home runs, and some chip and stolen bases, and just a really good runs and RBI total. Like, I just think he's such a fantastic way to start your draft. It's so safe. He may be the safest player in the first round.
Let me flip it a little bit for you, Joe. Let's talk OBP League. We don't talk about it a lot. But where does he zoom up to, Soto? Does he start to look as a potential number 1? I mean, he's as 400 banked as you can bank, man. He's never been below 400 OBP, 419, 410 the last 2 years. You start to get into his crazy seasons. 2021 was a full season of 465. 2020 was obviously the silly season, but he did put up a 490, which is just hilarious. He was on base half the time. But in an OBP league, how high does Soto start to creep? Because he's got a 7 average draft position. Do you get him in that top 3 at that point?
I think he's at worst number 4, and I think I could make a case for him as a top 3. Just looking at my Tout Wars draft from a couple days ago, he went at number 4 to DVR behind Ohtani, Witt, and Judge, and I don't have much of a problem with that. I think that you could probably put him into that top 3, maybe Witt. I mean, they're all so safe. I think those 4 are all worthy of a top 3 spot. And if you're drafting 4th in an OBP league and you just take whoever's still there, I think that's probably a pretty good way to go if you're able to choose your draft slot. But I think Ohtani probably should be considered a top 3 player there. It really splitting hairs at that point, but he's about as good as it gets in OBP leagues.
Soto lasted till 5 in my tout wars, which is still going on. It's the draft and hold. I think Chris Clegg got an absolute gem there. And I'm not going to sit here and tell Dan Strafford that he did something bad by taking Ellie De La Cruz, because of course you still get that amazing homer and steal production. But I think, again, at 5, that is a real boon there for Chris Clegg to get him in an OBP league there. Justin, do you share similar thoughts on Soto in an OBP league where you can creep into that top 3 or 4?
Yeah, I mean, I think he for sure deserves to be in the top 3 or 4 when you factor that in. And with Tout Wars coming up around the corner, definitely is someone that I will be targeting come my auction in New York here in like 2 weeks.
And you could still get one of the other guys that would go ahead of him in a draft because it's the auction situation too. So you even have more flexibility there to say, yeah, I still really want Witt, so I'm going to go Witt Soto, spend a ton of money there, and then kind of pivot from there. But OBP leagues, I do think he moves up a bit, Soto.
I do think from a strategical standpoint, though, that OBP got big OBP guys like Soto tend to be overrated in on base percentage leagues.
Think so. Okay.
I think it is hard to get OBP late in an auction or late in a draft, but I think often this is why I think it's so important to use some sort of calculator when you're going
to see where you're at.
Because I think people throw $5 extra on a guy or $7 extra on a guy when they really should be only throwing $2 or $3 extra. So just make sure if you're in a draft or in an auction especially, you have a really good understanding of how much that OBP really affects the guys that you're looking at.
Right. I think whenever we see, sorry, Paul,
go ahead. No, go ahead.
Whenever we see a category that's different, if it's there's a saves plus holds league, or if it's whatever the difference is, people will focus in too much on that difference and try and overcompensate.
Totally fair. And OBP can be like that. So you do have to be careful with that. We got another guy in a new spot, I should say. Kyle Tucker driving up north from Houston to Chicago, still stays in the best time zone, which is the Central Time Zone. I don't want to hear it from anybody else. I don't need football games at 8 in the morning over there on your West Coast, and I also don't want everything 6 in the morning. Disgusting.
6 in the morning during
even as somebody who wakes up early. That is disgusting. I don't need that. But no, so he's going to stay in the same time zone. Not that really matters, but he's going from Houston to Chicago. Joe, let's start with you on Tucker. What are we expecting in year 1 with the Cubs? It's still a good team. He's moving from one good team to another. Do you see any fundamental differences as he moves to the Cubs, or just more of the same greatness that we've come to expect from Kyle Tucker?
So he's a soft fade for me. He's not somebody that I have to avoid or anything like that. But where he's going, number 8 ADP between the range of 5 and 11, it feels a little bit rich. And especially, I was doing an episode of my own solo pod yesterday. I had Ryan Bloomfield on, and we were talking about first base. And this was in the Cody Bellinger context. But Sarah Sanchez pointed it out to Bloom that the worst park for left-handed hitters in baseball last year was Wrigley Field.
Yep.
So that's not something I love. If you're looking at the 3-year park factors on StatCast, Minute Maid Park, or they're changing the name. It won't be Minute Maid anymore.
Daikon Field later, but it was Minute Maid Park for the period that you're talking, yes.
So 101 overall park factor with a 110 home run park factor for lefties. Wrigley Field, 99 overall with a 90 factor for home runs. So
that's substantial.
The park is a substantial downgrade. The lineup is kind of interesting because the Cubs lineup is actually, I think, really good.
I think so too.
From that standpoint, I'm not really worried. I'm a big Seiya Suzuki guy. I think that top 3 Happ, Tucker, Suzuki is solid. But at the same time, it's probably not quite the same lineup that he had around him in Houston. So from a couple of standpoints there, I think that it's a bit of a downgrade. I think he's still a first-round player. I still have a first-round grade on him. But I prefer to take him in the 12 or 13 range as opposed to 8, if that makes sense.
So, it's kind of similar to Justin's beef with Judge. Different reasoning, but, you still like him up high, but you're maybe on the outside of his range. So unless Kyle Tucker really falls, you're probably not getting him. That's a really valid concern with Wrigley Field. How did that impact your projections for Kyle Tucker, Justin?
Definitely hurt him. So his X home run in Wrigley would have been 19, whereas it was 22 in Houston. So I think
78 games, by the way, just want to point that out because obviously he did miss a ton of time last year.
Yes. I still think it's been good, but I like Joe. I think he to me, he is more of a back half of the first round or, top half of the second round in a 15-teamer. So if you're playing in a 12-teamer, you're talking more like, hey, he's probably more of a mid-second rounder, and he's just not going there.
Right.
We're also adding the fact he's in a new organization. He's coming off of a season in which he missed a lot of time. So for me, would I not draft Kyle Tucker if I'm sitting there in the second round and he's there? No, I probably still would, but I don't think there's ever going to be a scenario in which that happens. And so I'm taking a lot of guys who are currently going behind him in front of Kyle Tucker. So I doubt I end up with Tucker this year.
I think that soft fade is fair. Yeah, like if he drops, okay, we're still going to get back in. If you start talking 15, 16 on the wheel there, which is not happening. It's fictional right now. But hey, pitchers are going to get moved up, especially in main event time. And if Tucker ends up being one of the guys that gets hit there, maybe you are creating a scenario then where he is available at 15, 16. I'm somebody who loves picking on the wheel. If he landed in my lap there, I am going to take him. But I think the points you guys bring up are very valid and, have been a bit eye-opening here because I actually had him ranked still in kind of where he's going with the ADP, and I'm going to bump him down a few spots there. It's a great call out on Wrigley. Thankfully, it will not affect our boy Seiya Suzuki. You're in the right podcast here, Joe. We're big Seiya Suzuki guys here, and I can't stop getting him. DVR, shake my fist at you. He was robbing me in labor all Tuesday night, and Seiya was probably the one that stung the most. Even though I've already got a ton of shares of him, I just absolutely love him. So great call outs there on Kyle Tucker. Let's go to Corbin Carroll. Very interesting season last year where, people were very, very frustrated with him through the first half. The shoulder was wonky. The stats were wonky. Things just weren't going well. But it's the classic. That's why they play the games, folks. That's why you play all 6 months. And honestly, this is why you don't cut a first rounder, really ever. Obviously if they are hurt for the year or something, I'm not saying that. I'm not an idiot. But if it's just underperformance, even in like a 10-teamer, and I'm not just saying it with hindsight, I was saying it on the show last year, you can't cut Corbin Carroll. You got to ride it out because if you rode it out, you got 17-17 in the second half in just 64 games after 5-18 with a 213 average in 94 games in the first half. That team, again, I feel like it was classic World Series hangover for them, which is funny to say too, because they actually won more games. Things just didn't go well, and they had a few guys kind of, have that hangover. Zach Gallen, I think, was chief among them. I think they're loaded for bear to be great again this year, and I think if everything is all right with Carroll and he builds on that second half, I think a huge season is incoming here. How do we feel, Justin, about Corbin Carroll with a 9 ADP right now with a decent range though, 6 to 15? He is somebody that can fall into that wheel there in the first round. Where are you at on Carroll right now?
I think Carroll is pretty appropriately kind of ranked right now. I think there's an argument for him. I think I said already, I think there's a top 7, and then after that, there's a second tier. And I think Carroll is kind of either the beginning of that second tier or should be right around there. So 8, 9, 10 for me. I think you can make the argument for Guerrero. I think you make the argument for Lindor, or, maybe one of the pitchers in Skeens and Skubal. But Carroll gives you so many stolen bases. It's just so many stolen bases. I think the real question is, does the average bounce back? It was, 231 after hitting 285 in 2023. I don't know that it's going to bounce back completely to that 280 level, but
I think it does. Sorry to interrupt you,
really?
but I just think it does, man. 256 BABIP, I think, was all of it, which the shoulder was a part of that too. I'm not just saying that it completely just happened to Carroll with the BABIP, but I think that first half malaise is something that I just don't see again. Obviously, the shoulder could flare up again. It has been a bit of a problem, and it only bounced up to 265 in the second half. I will be clear on that. But I think a fully healthy Corbin Carroll is a 300 plus BABIP guy, which he showed in that first full season 2023, as well as the month of 2022 that he had. And so I think he is somebody that, probably going to project closer to 270, but I do think the 280s are in play again. And so I really like him in the back half of the first round.
Yeah.
Joe, let's get your thoughts here on Corbin Carroll. The tumultuous season, I think partly because it ended on a high note and partly because, as Justin pointed out, he just runs so much. Even in his quote unquote down year, he went with 35 steals, still threw in 22 homers. He's not going to fall that far. mid to late first round. You're comfortable with that? And where do you come out on the average piece there that we were talking about?
I dig him as a late first rounder. I got him as my number 2 outfielder, which I don't think that's. I mean, he's number 4 by ADP, so maybe it's a little bit higher than consensus. But he looked about the same in the second half as he did the year prior when he broke out in 2023. The barrel rate was exactly the same, hard hit rate the same, launch angle was the same. He lost a couple ticks on the max EV, but I think we can chalk that up to the shoulder. And I think the shoulder at this point, it's a little bit dicey because he never had a procedure or anything to repair it, but it seemed to hamper him for about almost a whole calendar year, if not even a little bit more. And then, like you mentioned, 17 second half homers. It seemed like it might have just been something that healed on its own. We've had a couple of spring training games that he's played so far. He's played 3 of them. He has 2 homers and 2 steals already.
2-2 already, baby. Let's go.
I don't want to read too much into spring stats, but it's better than seeing 0 for 12 or something. So I'm buying back into it. It was the best offense in baseball by runs scored, and he's obviously a huge part of that. 121 runs in a down year is absurd. He's a massive stolen base boost. I think the batting average, I think it does come back. There was no real massive change in his, ground ball, fly balls. They were all about the same. Nothing that was too drastic there. So I do think that he bounces back. I think it's more BABIP induced based on the shoulder injury, and I think that he's a 270-ish type of hitter. I agree with you there, Paul.
Yeah, I'm pretty keen on Carroll. It seems like the whole group is here, even if Justin's maybe a little bit lighter on the batting average. I think we're all comfortable with where he goes and happy to take Corbin Carroll in that mid to late first round area, especially you, Joe, because you got him your number 2 outfielder. So if you're getting him with a double-digit pick, that feels pretty good. Next up is Fernando Tatis. Speaking of shoulders, that's always kind of lingering, but played through it last year, certainly, obviously looked healthy and had quite a season, very, very solid season there, bounced up from where he had been in 2023. So for any people that were concerned there, outside of the time missed, he played 102 games. When he was on the field, Fernando Tatis Jr. was awesome. 21-11 with a 276 average. That was good for a 130 OPS plus, up 20 points from 2023. And, had 4 fewer homers, but in 40 fewer games. So the power was up. Things were looking better. He's an MVP candidate to me. I think we've talked about all MVP candidates right now, to be honest, but I'm just saying, I would actually go so far as to say an MVP favorite for Fernando Tatis Jr. I think fully healthy, this is still one of the best players in baseball. I love his ADP. I've got no problem with him at pick 11. And in fact, he dips into the second round sometimes. He's got a max of 18. Speaking of that Tout Wars draft that I mentioned earlier, I am picking on the wheel at 15. And I went Tatis Jr., Vlad Jr., and I was happy to do it. I really, really like him there in that late first round situation. Justin, let's start with you on Tatis Jr. Where do we currently stand? Again, coming off a 102-game season, but he was so good that he basically put up a full allotment of stats there, except for the runs and ribbies, of course. You can only make up so much of that, even when you're dominating. But 21-11 is pretty good for 102 games. Where do we go in age 26 season for Tatis?
I'm just so skeptical of the health at this point. And I mean, it's one of those things where I'm not going to project him to have as few plate appearances as he did last year. And I do totally see where you're at in terms of on a per plate appearance basis, Tatis is elite. But we're now, 2 out of the last 3 seasons in which he has not gotten to 550 plate appearances.
Right.
I have a really hard time projecting him for more than that. So I projected him at 550. It's still a really, really good 550. And in 10s and 12s where that replacement value is there off of the wire, I think we can make the argument that, hey, he maybe even is like a, back end first round pick in a 12-teamer. But for me in a 15-teamer where there isn't that replacement value on the wire, I have a really hard time taking him in the first round. And so I have a second round grade on him as well, and which means I will likely not end up with Tatis in any leagues this year, and I'm okay with that. If I'm wrong,
I wouldn't go so far on that though, because again, he's got a max that dips into 18, 19 in the online championship, 18 in the DCs. You can definitely still get some Tatis there if you have a late first pick, and you want to get him. Say you pick 10 or 11. he might get back to you. Now, not always. He has a min of 8. So, like, there are times that somebody jumps out and really goes and gets Tatis Jr. He's got a min of 6 in the draft champions, which you're actually not doing this year. So the RotoWire's more in line for you. But yeah, you could still land on him. And are you ready to pull the trigger there then? If he does last, say you're picking 9 or 10?
It's really dependent on who else is there at that point. Like,
okay.
Like guys who I think I would take above Tatis are like, I think I might take Harper. I think I would take Chourio.
Oh, now wait, I got to challenge you a little bit on Harper. Doesn't he have some injury concern? Some lingering injury concern? A recent TJ? I know TJs for batters aren't as concerning, but 99, 126, and 145 games the last 3 years. Now, the most recent one is the full 145, 631 plate appearances. But does he not share some injury concerns there that might give you a little pause? And he doesn't bring the speed either.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I mean, he's still 7 last year, but I think he's, fully healed from that TJ. He was 631 last year in plate appearances, 546 in 2023 in spite of coming back from that injury.
Yeah, he's been scaling up. So he's got on a better trajectory. I can't deny that with regards to Tatis. I don't even think I'm not saying like you can't take it. Right. That saves him.
That first base, like it's so weird because like 10 years ago we'd be like, well, he's a first baseman, you get first baseman anywhere. And now it feels like if I don't get my first base early, like I might be regretting.
You don't like the way it turns out, right?
And I'm not pushing up any players necessarily because of any particular position. I think there are good players all throughout the draft at every position, but I think I prefer. Yeah, I think, and honestly, I don't know what the context of the lineup around Tatis and San Diego may look like all season. Like the back end of that team, like does not.
We talked about it the other day, right?
I love my Tirso guy, dude. Like,
right?
But that's really a shot in the dark. And like in the back,
and those are the guys. Those are the guys that have to get on base for him to drive in, right? Because he's batting 2. We feel comfortable that Arise is going to be on base a ton, but you need a good 7, 8, 9 there for your number 2 guy to still get a lot of RBI opportunities. And right now it's Jason Hayward, Elias Diaz, and Tirso Ornelas. And we did speak well. You did. I'm going to give you credit on that, on Tirso Ornelas, but it's no guarantee there. So there is a little bit of like, what are his RBI totals going to look like for Tatis? I still feel very confident in the runs because Merrill, Machado, Cronenworth, Bogey behind him are going to drive him in like crazy. But I do think that's fair to have a little bit of question on the ribbies, whereas somebody like Harper, I don't have that question. I think that lineup runs deep in Philly, and I think he'll be fine there. So I'm not even saying like I wouldn't take Harper. I just wanted to ask you the question about the health piece for sure. Tatis, for you, Joe, where do you come out? He's got an 11 ADP in the draft champions there, but again, another range similar to Carroll, 6 to 18. So some people step out and go get him and secure Tatis early. Other rooms say we're a little bit tepid on him and he gets into the second round. Where do you come out?
He's my 4th outfielder. I actually just took him over the weekend in my Earth League draft.
I think I would have drafted the weekend ahead of him. Sorry, that's a music reference. You're Canadian, you get it.
That's good. I took him at 10, and it was after a run of Tucker, Soto, and Carroll. I think 10, 11 is about where I come out on him.
Yeah.
I think the injury concerns are valid. I'm not sure what to make of the PED stuff at this point. I don't think it was.
Doesn't bother me personally.
I don't think it's much really of a worry. But I don't know. It'll always kind of be in the back of my head, so I don't know if I'll be able to get it out. But the data is still brilliant. Like a nearly 15% barrel rate, 55% hard hit. He underperformed all of the expected numbers: expected batting average, expected slug, expected WOBA. The lineup is interesting. Like it's not amazing, but right around him there, like Arise should be on base a lot, like you said. He gets on, and then he's got Merrill, Machado, Bogarts, Cronenworth to drive him in. So I think from a run and RBI standpoint, he's still pretty safe, but he's not like a huge target. Like I took him at 10 the other day because I thought that he was the best player on the board at 10, but some people, what's the minimum pick on him? 8. Yeah, it's not too bad really.
Well, draft champions at 6.
Yeah,
So
that's
different setup, but like
a
that
little
somebody went
rich.
out and got him there at 6, and I think that that's a little, again, I'm pro Tatis, but I also got him at 15, so it's easy to be excited there. And our boy Brett in the comments says, fair to say Tatis has the highest ceiling and lowest floor of the first round. I think he's probably got one of the bigger discrepancies. I will say, you guys have really struck some fear into me with Tucker. I wonder if he might have a lower floor because A, he's coming off half season, and B, going into Wrigley there that could sap his power. What if he ends up only hitting like low 20s? So I think, I don't know if it's definitively Tatis. I think maybe Tucker would have a case there for that split of ceiling to floor there. What do you think on that question there, since you posted it, Justin?
Yeah, so like I think this is my big concern, right? Like, and the reason why I'm probably not going to end up with Tatis, unless he really drops in a draft, which can happen, especially like in main event drafts where like pitching gets pushed up. Like,
Right, he
we
could
see
be
those
another
concerns,
push down there.
he could be a guy who pushes down to the middle of the second round. And there, I might have a real decision. But when I'm drafting in the first round, I am really thinking a lot about safety. I'm thinking about which guys have the most likely chance to hit that 80% outcome, as opposed to like the guys who like, oh, like if they go off, like they're gonna win me the league. All those guys are like
Right. It's a deep first round.
Yeah, every first rounder like has like top of the draft kind of upside, but not every first rounder has like complete bust potential. And I think Tatis is one of those guys because of his injury track record and the PED suspension.
And the PEDs, yeah.
I'm not as worried about that. Like I would hope he's not dumb enough to do that twice.
That'd be insane. He's made some pretty rough
know.
decisions though, right? Like the motorcycle stuff. So like his decision making, I don't think we can just say that Tatis couldn't possibly do it again. I think it is a fair concern to at least bring it up. So I'm glad you at least said something about it, Joe, because it doesn't sit in my brain as like a huge concern, but I also cannot rule it out. All right, go ahead, finish up there, Justin.
So for me, like I would rather take a guy at the back end of the first round that maybe doesn't have the Tatis quite upside, but I'm almost positive that a guy like Vlad Guerrero Jr.
You're taking Lindor probably too, right? Over him?
Yeah,
over Tatis.
Sure. Okay. Yeah, because I think Lindor has the same upside as Tatis. So like, we've seen pretty much 2 straight seasons of 30-30. So like,
he's so awesome. I love Lindor.
Let's not forget that quote though from Tatis when a reporter asked him, how are you getting over that motorcycle? Or I'm going to butcher the actual quote, but they asked him, how's the shoulder recovering from the motorcycle accident? And he said, which motorcycle accident?
That's right. Yes. When he said which one,
it's multiple,
was terrifying. Absolutely terrifying. All right. Mookie Betts is next. Justin and I have discussed him at both second and short. Justin's not so keen on him this year. Just got him down a little bit due to the age, coming off of an injured season. I'm a Mookie Betts fanboy, so I'm fully in the tank for him. I just cannot deny that. And that's where my bias is. So, if you're listening to me on that, understand that there is bias mixed in there. Not that like caping for Mookie Betts is, putting your flag on somebody who's dodgy, but I do understand some of Justin's concerns. I just don't care. I'm gonna ride it. He's a Dodger, so get me a piece of that lineup. Get me the second and outfield eligibility, the short and outfield eligibility everywhere, the second base eligibility in leagues with lighter qualifications. So where do you come out with him, Joe? He is a 12 ADP with a range of 8 to 17. So very similar to Tatis, where some people go out and get him in the middle of the first round and other rooms say, nah, you guys can have him in the early second round. Where do you come out on Betts?
I think he's an okay end of the first round pick. I wonder if the power numbers are going to start to decline a little bit. Like he did have a hand injury last year. I think that's what caused him to miss a lot of time, right? It was the hand, and the barrel rate really suffered. And I'm thinking that that's probably related, those two things. He went from a 12% barrel rate. He'd been in the 9, 8, 7% range down to 6. The hard hit rate from 48 to 39. So that's probably related in some way. I'm rather indifferent, to be honest. If I end up with him at the back of the first round, if he's on the turn, then I'm fine with it. I like the multi-position eligibility that I get with him. But I don't really have strong feelings one way or another. I've done like 16 or 17 drafts. I think I've taken him one time. If I end up with him, that's okay. He's not a huge target. He's not a huge fade. He's just okay. But I mean, maybe I'm underselling him considering that three-headed monster in the Dodgers lineup. He could easily go 120 runs, 120 RBI, and it wouldn't shock me either.
Right. That is crazy, but he does need to stay healthy. He's getting a little bit older, 32, not a baby, but not ancient either. And he did go 19-16 in just 116 games. And to your point about the runs and ribbies, and we were mentioning it with Tatis, how his were a bit short because he didn't play as many games. Even in 116 games, Betts went 75-75, and that just speaks to the unbelievable depth of that lineup. His ability to get on base, 372 OBP. You're never going to find me running away from Betts, at least not yet. Obviously, there'll come a point where Father Time catches up. But even right now, as somebody who is not afraid of the back of the first round there, if that's what I get in my main and I start looking and there's Betts, sign me up. If I get like a Lindor Betts start or something like that, I'm going to try to do a backflip. I can't actually do one, so I'll break my neck, but I will at least try to do the backflip because I would love to get that duo. That would work beautifully. Justin, you don't have to add anything if you don't want. You've said your piece. Do you want to add anything, or we move on to J-Rod?
I upped the plate appearances a little bit,
Okay.
and that puts Betts at the back of the first round for me. So
Okay, so he's back in the first.
I have him now, I think, and I should just look at my projections to tell you the exact numbers. I have Betts' projection at 625 plate appearances, so which gives him 27 home runs and 20 stolen bases of 290. So triple eligible guy who can that is totally fine as your back end of the first round. And if you want the positional flexibility, I have no problem people taking him 10, 11, 12, something like that.
18 games at second base, so you don't even need like the 5-game eligibility. If you just play 10 or 15, you're still getting that second base there for Mookie Betts, but NFBC requires 20, so it will be just shortstop and outfield for him.
Infield, outfield, still great though. Yeah.
Right, which is what we geek out over when it's infield, outfield. Let's go to J-Rod. Julio Rodriguez stuck in that hellhole of T-Mobile, and I say hellhole only for hitters. It's actually a beautiful park. I'm not actually clowning the park itself. I only mean that with respect to what it does to hitters, which is a lot. It stings them. It's causing problems. It's part of why their pitchers are so good too. And I don't say that to take anything away from their talent, but it does get amped up because that park is very difficult to hit in. And J-Rod kind of ho-hummed his way to a 2020 season last year. 20 homers, 24 steals, 24 for 29 though. Very good efficiency on the bases. 273 average, but only 68 ribbies and 76 runs. And he played a full season. I mean, 143 games, that's pretty full these days. If you get over 600 plate appearances, I'm calling it a full season. So 613, that's bad with the runs and ribbies. Justin, I'll start with you here. If you start with J-Rod, are you already trying to make up your runs and ribbies, or do you think this was a fluke? Because I do have to point out that he did go 100 in 2023. So it's not like he can't do it, but the 76-68 last year, pretty ugly.
Yeah, you shouldn't be starting with J-Rod. You should be starting with someone else. I don't have a first round grade on J-Rod either. Okay. I actually have him as, I have to
ninth rounder.
I have him as my 24th hitter.
Okay. So that is, let's see here. J-Rod is the 12th hitter. So you're doubling that up, and that's putting him around, at least as far as the ADP goes in the time frame I'm looking at, with Freeman and Riley and Acuna. Just so happen to be two Braves and a former Brave there, but that puts him around that group there. So that's more of a late second round, early third round situation, which means J-Rod's basically off your board, because even his max right now in the draft champions is 16, and J-Rod's max in the online championship, my computer's freezing right now, so I can't get it. But it just seems like you're not going to be able to get him with that grade right now. Yeah, 18 is the max there. So he dips into the second round sometimes, but you're looking at a third round grade on J-Rod. Mm-hmm. And I think I get it. I imagine it's the runs and ribbies that's doing the damage there, yes?
Yeah, and it's just the lineup around him is just so bad. Well, not so bad, but it's not good.
It's mediocre as hell.
And that park really, really hurts him. Like the fact that the Mariners didn't do anything to
do a thing, man.
Like address this offense in any way should be considered a war crime.
Right. To waste that pitching, right?
It is.
I agree.
They could have traded one of those pitchers and brought in a massive bat, even if they didn't want to go out and spend a lot of money. I just don't know what they're doing. Trader Jerry just did someone lock him in a dungeon somewhere in Seattle?
I guess.
I think there's a dungeon underneath the Starbucks in Seattle or something, because like we have not heard from him. And this lineup at the bottom is truly terrible. Like Dylan Moore is like an interesting guy for stolen bases, but like he should not be playing every day. He's like I want to say he's like a career like 180 something hitter against right-handed pitcher, and like he's going to be playing every single day. Like this is unreal. Like just I mean, this is the definition of malpractice from a baseball perspective. So like
I agree.
And I love J-Rod from a true talent perspective. Get him on any other team, and I would probably have him as a back end of the first rounder. But in Seattle, where they're unwilling to address the offense and that part kind of hurting him, I don't think he is even a second rounder at this point.
He's still a firm second rounder for me, but I share most of your concerns there. I'm just maybe a little less extreme on it, but I'm not even going to sit here and say that you're wrong. Like I'm not going to push back too hard on that.
What is the difference between him and Jackson Merrill?
The speed.
Yeah, probably the speed component, but at that point, just give me Merrill at a much cheaper price. He's 13 picks cheaper then, right? He's almost a full round cheaper. So I would rather just take Merrill because we just expressed some concerns about San Diego's lineup. It's nowhere near the concerns I have for Seattle's. So again, I co-sign your points. I think it is totally fair. Joe, where do you come out with J-Rod then? Because we're a little tepid here. Second round grade and a third round grade for Justin. Are you second round, or does he dip into your first round for J-Rod?
He's like a pretty classic turn pick. I had one DC where I started Julio and Chourio, and I felt pretty good about that. This was November, December though, but I felt pretty good about it, and I still feel.
Well, you thought Seattle was going to do something, right? You're dreaming of Pete Alonso coming in and some
honestly,
other moves.
That was it. I thought Pete Alonso was going to go to Seattle.
I did too.
I didn't think that their big moves would be like, what was it, bringing back Jorge Polanco? Like
that's
that was
it.
A big move. Like
everything else was what they already did. Like they're putting their faith in the Robles and Arozarena moves, both of which I like. I thought they were fine moves, but they're putting in their stock into full seasons of them and bringing back Polanco, which that's not enough heat for me to help J-Rod and company.
I think he's fine in that kind of standpoint where he's on the turn. I might have to bump him down a little bit. I have him as my 7th outfielder, and after hearing you guys talk, that's probably a little high. I'm probably going to bump him down below. I have him right above Alvarez and Chourio. I might bump him below them.
Those are the two that I bumped him below. So I'm right. I basically preemptively have done the move that you're talking about doing, but that's where I came out with it for J-Rod.
If you look at the WRC plus in each season, went from 148 to 128 to 116, barrel rate 13 to 12 to 10. Not great trends, but at the same time, he's 24. So I don't think we can count out that he can just bounce back and give us another 30-30 season. But those counting stats are the big concern. I think we can probably split the difference between the last 2 seasons, and he's probably an 80-something run an RBI guy. But that probably puts him as an early second rounder. Yeah, the more I think about it, he probably doesn't belong in that first round, and that's where I've had him. But I'm going to have to make an adjustment there.
Yep, that's where I come out with J-Rod. And again, Justin's a bit lower there, looking at him as more of a third rounder, more in the Jackson Merrill, Ronald Acuna Jr., Wyatt Langford camp of outfielder. And, that means he's not going to get him, but I don't necessarily think that he's wrong. All right, so that's the first tier there. Let's go into tier 2 here. And I just made some educated guesses on the splits here with the tiers. So you don't gotta, these were all first round ADP guys. So now we start to get into the second round guys. And I think this tier cuts off with Teoscar. So we get into some third round guys at this point, but we'll see how we're going. We're at 53 minutes. So we might only do like half of this tier right now anyway. So I'll put a little break in there that we might not get all the way to, but we have some time. So let's start with Jackson Chourio. And you mentioned that you went J-Rod Chourio in a draft there, which I do like that start. Even with my concerns about J-Rod, I think Chourio can kind of bridge the gap there. And if you just flip them and you say Chourio was your first and J-Rod was your second, it's not that different on the wheel there, but great debut. It's nice when a plan comes together, and it really did for Chourio. What does he do for an encore, Joe?
I don't do handmade projections, but I think that he's probably a 28 homer, 30 steal guy who's going to hit like 270. I think the lineup is still very solid. I don't think the lineup is as good as it was last year. I think losing Adames is a concern.
Sure.
I think Yelich with his back and potentially not being ready for opening day could be a concern. I don't think the lineup is amazing, but I think it's still good enough where he could probably get you into that 80 and 85 and 90, something like that in terms of runs and RBIs. I think he's a very safe pick, especially if you're projecting growth further than what we saw. He's 20. He is 20 years old.
It'll be his age 21 season, but yeah, he's technically still 20 years old right now.
Yeah.
Jackson Chourio is, which is bananas. He turns 21 on March 29th. Bro can't even get a drink yet and just had an amazing season. It's funny for you to say safe for somebody who's not even 21 yet. And yet I don't disagree with you. I don't. Like, I see it. Like, he's 2020 in the bag, it feels like, for Chourio. And I agree with your bringing down the Milwaukee lineup a little bit, but they do have a lot of talent. And I do still see a world where somebody like a Garrett Mitchell spikes a big season, or maybe even Sal Frelick. Like, they have guys that can do it. I don't know who it's going to be. Maybe there's a rebirth for Rhys Hoskins, although I've stopped kind of projecting that and drafting for it. Joey Ortiz maybe could break out. Caleb Durbin is a fun spring guy that people are geeked about. Maybe he surges forward. So they have some guys who could kind of bridge some of that gap of Yelich's health concern and, losing Adames. But even if not, it's still a competent enough lineup to get 90 to 95 runs out of Chourio with 80-something ribbies. And again, 2020 in the bank with 30-30 as a potential. I totally agree there.
That second half was just such an improvement. Like, he wasn't bad in the first half, but it was a little bit of a slow start. Like, he had a 32% strikeout rate through his first month, batting 206. But in the second half, he had an 18% strikeout rate, a 150 WRC plus, 150 in the second half at age 20 with 12 home runs and 12 stolen bases in 63 games. Like, the extrapolating thing can be dangerous, but if you start to extrapolate what he did in the second half as a 20-year-old and you think, okay, penciling a little bit of growth, even though it's not linear, as the old saying goes, but this guy could go 35 and 35 and hit 300 and win NL MVP potentially. And I wouldn't be sitting here, exactly shocked by it. I'm not projecting it, but the skill set is there for him to be the number one fantasy player. If he finished as the number one overall player this year, would you guys be shocked by it?
No, it would be like an upset because of like where he's going, but I wouldn't say, oh my God, how did Chourio do this? He's absolutely in that bucket of players that can do it. And again, not even 21 yet. He turns it in a month and 2 days. Justin, you've been nodding your head to some of the things that Joe's been saying here. Seems like you agree. Where do you come out with Chourio in year 2?
I just love that Joe said he's like, I don't do like by hand projections, but like, and I do hand projections, and like then he just got to pretty much spit out the line for Chourio. I have Chourio with 27 home runs, 26 stolen bases, 277 batting average, 95 runs, and 93 RBIs.
It's fantastic.
It's just a really great line, and we're also talking about a guy that is 20 years old, going to be 21. And I agree with Joe. Like, if he's the number one player being drafted in fantasy next year, I'm not going to be surprised. Like, all the concerns I had for him coming up through the minor leagues in terms of his ability to make consistent in zone contact were just absolutely answered last season. He made an 86.4% zone contact, which is above league average. And he got better as the season went on. Like Joe said, he kind of struggled the first 2 months of the season, but from June on, like, he was just money in the bank. And I don't think there's any reason to think that he can't continue to grow as a player, being as young as he is and as talented as he is. So right now I have kind of a mid-second round grade on him, but that's because I gave him a median projection. So I have no problem taking him at the beginning of the second round and just kind of shooting for that upside, especially if you start safe, like a Vlad Guerrero Jr., Chourio,
that is a combo,
or even a Lindor, Chourio kind of combo there at like the 13 hole or something like that is money in the bank to me, and I love Chourio this year.
17, 18 ADP, whether you're looking at the online versus the draft champions, so very close there, with a max of 20 in the OC and a max of 21 in the DC there. So both league types, and they are very different. The draft and hold 15-teamer versus the 12-team Fab League, and yet they still see Chourio very similarly there. Somebody that you're looking to get on the wheel. And again, I agree with like pair him with like one of those bankable, 4 or 5 years in the bank veteran types, and you're just sitting pretty after the first 2 rounds there. I absolutely love it. Let's continue you on. Now, I am curious, would you pair him with this guy? Yordan Alvarez. It's Jordan, but everyone calls him Yordan or Yordan, so I'll acquiesce, even though we were told directly from, and not a great guy, but Jeff Lunau confirmed to the media when he was coming up that it is Jordan. And one thing that guy knows, well, a couple things. He knows cheating and he knows Spanish pronunciations because he speaks fluent Spanish, spent a lot of time down there. So again, for all Lunau's flaws, I take his word at that. And he said it was directly from Alvarez, but again, he goes by Yordan or Yordan, wherever you hear it, but it is Jordan. But Alvarez, is that somebody that you would pair with Chourio, Justin? Is that a 1-2 punch you could get behind?
Probably not. I am just so concerned about the health on Alvarez.
The knees?
Yeah, like
they scare me too.
I don't even have a 3rd round grade on him.
So he's off your board essentially.
Yeah, he's essentially off my board. Like the health on him is just too scary. So I'm a little worried about that.
How do you balance that with now? Because you're very big on your plate skills and ability. You mentioned that Soto, arguably the best pure hitter in the league. I think Alvarez you don't get too far down the list before getting Alvarez. It might be number 2, might be number 1 in terms of best pure hitter in baseball. How do you balance that as somebody who loves the plate skill stuff so much versus the injury concerns, which are valid, but 598, 561, 496, and 635 on the plate appearances. 3 of those seasons over 550, including a 635 just last year. And even in the seasons where he comes up short, like 496 in 2023, he still put up a full season, 3197 with 77 runs and a 293 average. So how do you balance those two things there, where he's shown that he can still put up a pretty full season, even in fewer than 500 plate appearances for Alvarez?
I think in a 10-team league or even like a shallow 12, like I'm totally fine taking the gamble, right? Like it's just like the replacement value is there. And it's not like I projected him for 450 plate appearances or something. I projected him 580. Like, so like I'm giving him like, close to like what he usually has been able to do. I just think people are drafting a guy right there on 600 plus plate appearances. And we're also not like acknowledging the fact that I think the Astros are worse offensively.
Tucker's gone. Yep. That's fair.
Like last season he had 635 plate appearances, but he didn't break 90 runs or RBIs. And I'm not banking on 6 stolen bases again. So like for me, like I just think everything comes back down a little bit. Because I'm not projecting him for 600 plus plate appearances. And that just puts him a little bit more towards the boring side. And then you're also talking about a guy who's really a 4-category contributor, a good 4-category contributor.
Right.
But I can get 5 categories in the second round from a lot of guys, and that's usually I'm going to end up going.
Okay. I think you acquitted yourself all right there. That is fair. Because I'm not taking him either. So I'm not coming at this from I'm taking Alvarez everywhere, defend yourself. The knees terrify me. And again, even though I just laid out the plan of like 3 seasons over 550, including 635 in the most recent season. The only one pushback I would give a little is, yes, losing Tucker is big, but I like the Paredes and Walker pickups. I should say Tucker and Bregman. I have to include both there. But Paredes and Walker, they're not Bregman and Tucker, but they're not a bad facsimile thereof. That said, the bottom of that order gets pretty garbagey too. McCormick, Ben Gamble, and Jake Myers, you start to see why Altuve is practicing out in the outfield, right? Because that is pretty rough. And then it opens the door for Justin's favorite player, Brendan Rodgers. And if you don't listen to the show regularly, I need to alert you that I am joking. Justin hates Brendan Rodgers, always has. It's my dumbass who keeps drafting him. But I'm going to do it again this year because I think he's going to play some second base with Altuve out and left, baby. And Houston's magic. They will fix him. Just give him a buzzer.
There's nothing to fix.
They just got to give him a buzzer. Shut up.
He's just been bad his entire career.
No.
Please just get over this.
I will not. And when he does well, I will bring it up every episode. And if he doesn't do well, I'll never talk about him again and pretend that this conversation never happened. So shut your mouth. All right.
You know what I need to do is just like make clips of all our worst takes. And
just
then
go get all of my Rodgers takes.
All of your Rodgers takes, all of both of our Gavin Lux takes.
Hey, he's coming back this year. Shut your mouth.
I can even grab some Chris Stratton takes for myself. And
yes.
And just So that way, when we get to like episode 1500, I can just do a scissor reel of like all of our worst possible.
We did it at Fantasy Pros this year. There was a football podcast compilation of all the hosts on the show, and the producers just cobbled together all their worst shit takes from the year.
That's amazing.
That's fantastic because you gotta be able to acknowledge your L's, right?
Mm-hmm.
I really got a problem with the people in the fantasy world that just want to run from their L's, excuse, and never just say, you know what, I ate shit on that one. And I'm not here for it because you're not going to go 100%. You're not going to go anywhere near. Nobody's expecting you to. And so if you really can't absorb your L's, you're kind of a clown, and I got no use for you in this game here.
If there's new people listening to this who are like content creators, it's a good way to be respected by your peers, to take your L's on the chin and not try and bury them. You know, you just got to wear that.
Don't run from them. Acknowledge them. Now, some of them you can have like an excuse, like it can be an injury thing. Like I'm not saying you can never defend yourself on them, but some are just bad takes, right? I've got bad takes where I just was dead wrong on a guy. Okay, clown me for it, and I'll eat it, and we'll move forward. And I'm down to 180 on a guy. We just had a big discussion earlier this week. I 180'd on Jordan Westbrook. Now it's going to be interesting to see what happens. He gets a little nicked up right now, but it's going to be interesting to see what happens this year because now that's a debate player for Justin and I. This is a great take here as I move back to Joe for the Alvarez take. Brett, our boy, says this is a young Giancarlo Stanton, and I think that's pretty fair. The only pushback I would give on that is if we compare it, Alvarez has actually stayed more healthy, but I think that the spirit of that comparison makes some sense. You don't think so?
I got to go look at early.
Pull up early Stanton. Wasn't he missing like tons of games? Actually, no. I think it's actually a perfect comp. I think it's actually a perfect comparison. But by that same token, after the two big missed years, remember 15 and 16, he played 74 and 119 games. It was 17 that he had as MVP. So I understand why people are going to keep coming to the well on Alvarez. And we're not even coming off of a down season from a health perspective, but I understand why you stay bought in on somebody like that. Joe, where are you on Alvarez? Justin's got him off his board, third, fourth round grade, so that's never getting him. Where do you come out on Alvarez at age 28 with the knees of a 58-year-old?
It's interesting. You prefaced the whole thing with like the Chourio Alvarez pairing, and Tim McLeod did that on the weekend. Tim McLeod did that in our Earth League draft. So I'm interested. I
think it's hot
how that plans out. I don't hate it. I don't mind it. Alvarez, he worries me. Not just from a health. Like, there's a lot of different reasons. The health is definitely a thing, and I want them to be smarter with him. Why the hell is he ever playing the field last year?
Well, and to that point, I mentioned how bad their outfield is. He's not going to be out there. This is part of why Altuve is going out there as well, which I actually don't have a problem with. I know he's 35 and we're making Altuve a left fielder. I think he'll be fine. I really, really do. I'm not too worried about it, especially if it saves Alvarez to be DH only all year long. Does that give you a little bit more confidence if they commit to DH for every game for Alvarez?
It does, yeah. And I think it makes sense to move off Altuve. Like, his fielding metrics are
He's
atrocious.
Never been good at second, and it's only getting worse.
Awful. So I'm in support of that. Now, they're not seriously worrying, but if you look at the barrel and hard hit rates each of the last 3 years, they've kind of starkly declined. Now, they're starting from such a high number that they're still looking very good.
Right.
But 21 to 18 to 14 on the barrel, 60 to 52 to 59 on the hard hit. Now, 15 and 50 respectively are still ridiculous numbers there. But the trend is kind of concerning to go along with the injuries. Why was he stealing any bases last year? I don't know. For a guy with
that, I don't know. But he was like, 6 for 6, baby.
I know. It was ridiculous. Like, he was efficient, sure. We'll take it, but why? Why do you guys feel the need to get some extra steals out of?
Yeah, that's just Alvarez? Extra risk that we do not need on his knees. I agree with you there, for sure.
But I think as a turn pick, he's fine. I worry a little bit, and honestly, I don't think I've actually hit draft on him this year. Maybe once. You do so many drafts, I honestly forget. I have to look at the player shares page, but maybe one time. But he's not a big target. Like, that lineup is not great. It's not. I shouldn't say it's not great. It's still very good, but the bottom half is atrocious. It took a hit.
The two guys, again, I like Paredes and Walker. I'm drafting both, but they are not Bregman and Tucker. And like you said, the current penciled in outfield, which is the bottom third of that lineup, McCormick, Gamble, Jake Myers, that's terrible. That's legit bad.
White Sox
Even
love
as
the bat.
even as somebody who's liked even as somebody who's liked McCormick in the past, that is a bad trio there. So I think those points are well said. Now, is he a second rounder for you, Alvarez?
Yeah.
Okay.
He would be a second rounder, early second rounder for me, I think.
Okay, so you're still in the realm of where he'd go. Like you can get him there. So Justin's the only one that's got him off the board. You and I are still at least open. But again, like I said,
Yeah.
I have not taken him, and I usually pivot elsewhere. He's been available to me at times, and I'm still not pulling the trigger, and it really is entirely the knees. And that does give me some concern. This next guy.
Can I just
absolutely.
say before we move on,
Of
because we
course.
talked about Altuve, potentially going out to the outfield. I'm really hoping they wear their green jerseys and we can have like a little Where's Waldo with like the blades of grass and Jose Altuve out there.
So you need them to wear the green jerseys, particularly in a couple of weeks on St. Patrick's Day.
Yeah.
And hopefully we're like, he's playing in left, and we're just like, where's Jose?
Yeah.
Jose,
They're
where'd you
playing
go?
with 8 guys out there. They can't even see Altuve.
And ideally, they would be playing Boston in Boston's home, which has a replica green monster, to add to the effect of all that green, and then just little Jose bouncing around everywhere and like, where the hell is he? That's really funny. I hope they do that too. All right, let's move on to the next guy here, Jarren Duran. I've struggled with him, guys, and maybe you can sell me if you're in, or you will just confirm where I'm at, which is I'm not there. Now he does have a nice range, 16 to 28. So at the back end of that range for Jarren Duran with an average draft position of 22, I can get in, but I see him, at least in the drafts I've been in, he's been consistent in that wheel pick or the early second round, and I just don't get there. And I don't even know that I can perfectly explain why I'm out. I think I just don't fully buy it, and maybe I'm wrong. So Justin, let me start with you on Jarren Duran. 21-34 last year, wonderful season. The power spiked way up. The speed was already there. He went 24 for 26 back in 2023. That was brilliant. He goes 34 for 41 last year. Fantastic. Average has been there. Doesn't take his walks, and I think that's at least part of why I'm against him, but I don't usually hold that too much against guys if they're producing otherwise. 111 runs is brilliant. I love that lineup. Am I wrong to just not really be in on Duran? Like, I never give him a second look during my drafts.
Okay, so I feel like this episode has been just like an episode of like me like shitting on guys, like, and I don't like that. So I'm not going to do that here, and I'm going to say, you should absolutely be totally in on Jarren Duran. Made some really good, really good changes. I think. In terms of like increasing that hit or well, I can't even talk right now. I'm so excited about Jarren.
You're so geeked about him, yeah.
Yeah, like I feel like he made some improvements to the hit tool. He's one of the few guys I think you can pretty comfortably project for 700 plate appearances. Like that is money in the bank. There's power, there's speed. He's on top of a really good lineup. I have him for 22 home runs and 35 stolen bases and a 281 batting average. I think Jarren Duran is a fantastic pick in the second round, especially if you start off with someone who's pretty safe in the first round. So like a Duran, Vlad Guerrero Jr. for me, like love that start.
That is very hot. When you look at the numbers and the projections, they're all there. Again, I don't have a negative case. I just been ignoring him. And sometimes I have these black holes and Westberg was like that, right? Obviously deeper in the draft, but like I didn't really have, outside of the lineup spot, which we really ragged on with him, and then it was moved the next day. So we were talking about him batting 7-8, and we were like, that's terrible. The very next day, Roster Resource bumped him up to 4 for Westberg. But like with Duran, it might just be I haven't dove deep enough because I'm looking at this season, and I just did not realize how brilliant he was. He led the league in doubles and triples, which doesn't matter for 5x5 leagues, except that it obviously puts you in line to score more runs, which he scored 111, 21 homers, 75 ribs, 34 steals, 285 average. It was all there, Joe. Do you co-sign with Justin that Duran is definitely somebody to look at in the second round and actually attack and target?
It's interesting, Paul, the way you put it. Like, I'm not terribly interested, but I don't have a good reason why is exactly where I'm at. Like, I have him as my 13th outfielder, which is 3 spots below ADP.
Mm-hmm.
And I couldn't really give you a great reason why I'm below consensus.
We might just be wrong.
we're just
like
wrong,
I don't understand how you can love Jackson Chourio and not love Jarren Duran. Like, is it just
And I
there
think
was
that's
more
a
prospect?
crystallizing point that makes a lot of sense to me.
Is it like still there was just more hype for Chourio when he was coming up
Sure.
that Duran, or is it like Duran's like initial sample was bad? But I mean, he was fantastic in 2023 in 362 plate appearances, and he was fantastic last year in 735 plate appearances.
He's cleared those early struggles for me. I do not hold 21 and 22 against him. They were small samples. I'm beyond that personally.
And we have to and I hammer this home with guys like Vlad Guerrero Jr. because I've often seen Vlad Guerrero Jr. go in the back half or the back half of the first round or early in the second round, and I have to stress 700 plate appearances with a very good average is huge
Monstrous.
for your base the rest of the way. Like, you can take on guys like Kyle Schwarber, you can take on batting average sinkholes because you took that pick. And Duran is a 5 category guy, with those 700 plate appearances. I just think
before someone comments, I will say it's 671 at bats, which is what matters for average. But your point still stands.
Yeah.
I just want to point that out before someone does the old. It's technically, I'm that guy.
I get that, but at the same time, he helps you so much, giving you a good base, and you can go so many different directions. I love the guys who can compete in 5 categories, because it gives you a lot of different options later on putting together your team.
No, I really think that is a great point to stress there with that batting average that you're getting for so many at-bats for Duran with the power and the speed. And I adore this lineup. It is so deep. They are so good. Anybody gets hurt, they just replace him with a superstar prospect right now. The first 2 or 3 injuries that they face are just going to be Christian Campbell, Roman Anthony, Marcelo Meyer, probably later in the season, but you get my point. They are so deep there, and he's just going to be atop that lineup scoring all day long. And I think that is huge for Duran. So I think you guys I think Justin, you've sold Joe and I to get him back where he belongs at that 9-10 outfield spot, because I am down on Alvarez. So why wouldn't I just put Duran there? And I'm okay on Jazz, but I actually like him more as a third base anyway. Merrill, I'm not anti at all, but I kind of had Merrill and Duran close, and that shouldn't be the case. I should have Duran firmly above Merrill, and you've sold me. I'm moving him up my rankings.
I have Merrill ahead right now, but I'm going to have to switch that back after hearing you.
I think I'm hitting that switch there.
I have Mookie Betts, even with moving Mookie Betts up, I have Mookie Betts and Jarren Duran worth within literal pennies of each other.
Wow.
And I don't, even as the biggest Mookie fanboy, I don't think that that's wrong. 28 years old for Duran, right? You mentioned the Chourio thing about he had more hype. Well, Duran was a legit prospect, and he's still very much on the right side of 30. He's still very much in a growth phase. And I'm not saying that he's going to improve upon 2024, but it's not out of the question either. We're not in the decline phase for Duran. So yeah, there's a lot of reasons to be hyped, and I think I've been sold to get on board here. And again, I've been stressing it all episode, but as somebody who picks late, he could be my second pick.
And I literally don't have Duran improving. I have him virtually repeating last season and being worth, early second round pick.
That is fantastic. All right, I'm on board there. We are coming up on our time here. Let's call it here. Let's call it here, I think, because we deep dove these guys, and I did enjoy that quite a bit. I think we'll probably still be doing outfield by this time next week, Joe. Yeah. So we'll probably have a few tiers deeper, but you'll be able to join us for the super deep league type outfielders next time we talk. Because Justin, you and I will get tomorrow, and we'll start on the rest of these guys here, and then move into that sort of third tier. And then Monday we'll probably be on the 4th tier. So yeah, by the time we do our next Thursday episode. Actually, it won't even be that deep yet. I think we'll be in the Kerry Carpenter, Cedric Mullins, Elliot Ramos range of guys there. So we'll have you back on for some more outfielders, Joe, but it was great talking with you. Glad to have you on here. Glad to have you a part of Fangraphs as well. Gentlemen, what do you guys got coming up? What's going on? Obviously, we're all super busy right now. Joe, let's start with you. What's on the docket for you here?
I got a couple of fun podcasts that are coming out, not on this feed, but on the Fantasy Pros feed. I did an ADP battle series. We're going starting pitchers this Saturday, Nick versus Eno. That should be
Ooh,
a lot of
that's
fun.
going to be fun.
It was a lot of fun to record. And then Tuesday, DVR versus Jeff Erickson going through.
Oh,
I forget
wow.
if it's infield or outfield. Yeah, no, we got some fun shows coming up there. That's mostly what I got going on. I got my solo pod too, but more so just the Fantasy Pro stuff. And here now, which I'm very grateful to be a part of the show. This is a fantastic podcast. You guys are great to talk with, and I hope I don't bring it down too much.
No, it's great to have you. And I started watching. I only watched a part of it this morning here before we got started. But you with Joe Pizza Pizza and Christopher Welsh, I liked what you were doing with the 3 words to describe sleepers. Just putting a new twist on the sleeper episode there. That's the one that came up in my feed this morning on YouTube. So I started watching that. Justin, what do you got coming up? I know you're trying to finish those SP projections, and that's dominating your time right now, I presume.
I am legit. And I told you guys before we hit the record, but I'm legit thinking about calling in sick to my actual my day job tomorrow, just so I can.
Don't listen to this day job.
Yeah, they don't listen. They don't even know I do any of this stuff. Thank God. So, I'm probably going to call in sick tomorrow and just work on SP projections all day long.
That's a fun day, by the way.
Yeah, right. Turn on some baseball and do SP projections. I also have like about 17 articles I need to write over the course of the next 3 or 4 days. So I'll be probably up till 3 o'clock in the morning doing that. So lots of content for Fangraphs, lots of content for Fantasy Pros. Potapalooza is a little over a week away, so I'm going to start sending out emails to set the schedule for that. But the weekend of, I think, what is that, the 6th, 7th of March? Tout Wars a couple weeks after that, or a week after that. And TGFBI starts on Monday. So if you like TGFBI content, we'll be talking a lot about that on Potapalooza. And we will also, you'll be seeing boards all over X, Blue Sky, Facebook, all those places. So
wait.
It is seriously like, it feels like mile 20 of a marathon right now. And I just want to die, but at the same time, I'm having a blast.
It's the best time of the year. I absolutely love it. Joe and I will also be part of First Pitch Online, which kicks off tonight. In fact, once the hosts kind of do their thing, Nick Pollock and I are kicking it off with some player pool analysis. And guess what we're talking about? Starting pitchers. Huge surprise, I know.
Should have been catchers.
Joe will be covering the AL labor auction. He'll be commentating that on Friday, and I'll be doing the NL one on Saturday. So we'll also be part of that. You guys can find us everywhere. I did another SP ranking update today. I got more coming. I'm churning out the profiles. A lot of rankings switches right now. As you battle test rankings, we talked about like Duran here, where it's like once you get into the heat of the battle, and you're like, wait a minute, I like this guy a lot more. Or I don't like this guy a lot more. You can really see some stark changes in your rankings. At least that's how I'm feeling. Like I had some guys that were ranked really high on my SP rankings that I was just not touching for round after round after round. And I realized, hey, they got to come way down then. Like there's no reason for these guys to be up here because I'm simply not taking them where they're at. I'm trying to think of a guy who I moved down a ton who was just sitting there. Zach Littell was one of them. I've really moved down the Tampa Bay guys. I am definitely afraid of that ballpark, as a lot of folks are. There was another guy that I was like, I just never took him, and I can't find him right now. So who cares? You can find it in the SP rankings. Gentlemen, it was great talking with you. We will be back tomorrow, Justin, in the morning. Until then, take care.